Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
Thanks for having me back. I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, me too. So, what if I told you that the ultimate force of evil, like the devil himself, didn't actually start out as God's enemy, but as his most valuable employee?
It sounds crazy, but it's totally true.
Right. And today, we're not just, flipping through some spooky catalog of
Oh.
ancient monsters. We're taking a really profound look at how humanity's whole concept of ultimate evil directly shapes our understanding of God, of morality, and eventually of atheism.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive journey.
It really is. I mean, we're going from ancient cosmic sea dragons to this divine employee in a heavenly courtroom, all the way down to modern atheistic frameworks where the devil is purely a metaphor for human free will and rebellion.
It is an incredible evolution to track, and I really just want to welcome you, the listener, to this conversation. Because honestly, whether you are deeply religious or strictly secular or, just insanely curious, this deep dive is going to completely reframe how you think about good and evil. We're really looking at how the ultimate adversary evolved right alongside humanity's biggest philosophical questions. Like, we're going to see how our ancestors tried to make sense of a broken world and how those ancient answers...
They're still echoing around today.
Exactly, still echoing in modern philosophy.
So we're pulling from these really comprehensive mythological breakdowns and deep theological analyses. Places like the Bible Project, for instance, just to understand how we define the dark side of existence.
Yeah, we're going to unpack exactly how that celestial employee went rogue.
But first, if you like my channel, please subscribe and hit the like button. Okay, so let's start with the absolute baseline here. Before we even get to a devil, early humanity had to figure out a massive, glaring problem.
Right, the big one.
Yeah, like if a creator God is entirely good, why is the physical world so incredibly painful?
That is the core mechanism driving all of this. In theology, they call it theodicy.
Theodicy, right.
Yeah, the problem of evil. So imagine you're a farmer, 3,000 years ago. A sudden drought destroys your crops, or some awful disease sweeps through your village. You look up at the sky and you wonder...
Did the gods do this to me?
Exactly. Is the creator actually cruel? Ancient humans desperately needed an answer that protected the goodness of their primary deity, and their solution was what we call dualism.
They just split the universe down the middle. They essentially said, our God didn't do this. A second, equally powerful dark God did it.
Precisely the underlying logic. So dualism proposes that the universe is this balanced, eternal struggle between two distinct, really powerful forces. Zoroastrianism is, it's a classic example here.
Right, in ancient Persia.
Right. They viewed existence as a literal cosmic war between Ahura Mazda, who's the supreme god representing all that is good, and the evil spirit Angra Mainyu.
And this wasn't a war where the good God was secretly holding all the cards behind his back either.
No, not at all. It was a genuine, terrifying struggle. And we see this strict dualism echo super loudly in Manichaeism later on, too. In their view, the god of light reigns in his kingdom, wholly separate from the Prince of Darkness.
Let me jump in on Manichaeism real quick, because the mechanics of how they explain human existence are just fascinating. They believe the material world only exists because the darkness literally attacked the light and mingled their elements together.
Yes, the mingling is key.
Right, so humans are not just, living in a war zone. We are the war zone. Like, we are trapped mixtures of light and dark particles in the devil's grasp. It explains human suffering perfectly for them. Your body is the darkness, but your soul is the light.
That perfectly encapsulates the ancient mindset. The material world is inherently conflicted. You even see this in the ancient Central Asian belief of Tengrism.
I was reading about that in the sources.
Yeah. They have a creator god, but they also have Erlik, the ruler of the underworld. And the myth says Erlik actually helped craft the earth, but he hid some primordial mud in his mouth to create his own domain.
He hid it in his mouth.
Right, and when the creator forced him to spit it out, that spat-out mud formed the swamps, the wastelands, all the harsh places of the earth.
So the swamps are literally the spat-out deceit of the underworld god. That's wild.
Yeah.
So in all these ancient views, even going back to the Egyptian chaos, serpent Apep trying to swallow the sun god Ra every night, evil is this independent cosmic rival.
It's a heavyweight boxing match.
Exactly, a match where the outcome isn't guaranteed on any given Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
But then we look at early Judaism, and there's this tectonic shift. Like suddenly, the boxing ring is just dismantled. There is no cosmic rival.
This is where the history of theology takes a really sharp turn. Because if you look at the Hebrew Bible before the Babylonian exile, early Judaism doesn't traditionally recognize a supernatural devil opposing God at all.
Which is so counterintuitive to what people assume today.
Completely. The theology is intensely monotheistic. God is utterly sovereign over everything. In the book of Isaiah, Yahweh explicitly says, I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. Yeah, that leaves absolutely zero room for an independent cosmic adversary. God is the author of the entire system, the good and the bad.
Which completely changes the dynamic of the word Satan. In these early texts, it's not a proper name.
Right, it's not some guy named Satan.
Yeah, it's a title.
Yeah.
In Hebrew, it's ha-Satan, which translates to the adversary or the slanderer.
Hmm.
And when this figure actually shows up in the text, he isn't some fiery ruler of hell plotting to overthrow the cosmos. He's walking right into God's throne room.
Look at how he functions in the book of Job or Zechariah. He is an accuser in God's court. Like, he is actively testing human faith, but he's doing it strictly with divine permission.
He's on the clock.
Yes. Most Jewish interpretations treat him as a divine agent carrying out God's will. Even in later rabbinic literature, Satan appears in various roles, sometimes the angel of death, sometimes a tempter in human form, but always as an instrument of the divine structure, never an enemy of it.
I love trying to visualize this in modern corporate terms. The early biblical Satan is basically a celestial prosecuting attorney. Or, actually even better, he is God's lead quality assurance tester.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. If God built the system of human morality, Ha-Satan is the guy hired to try and hack it. In the book of Job, God says, look at my servant Job, he's perfect. And the QA tester steps up and says, well, yeah, only because you pay him well. Take away his health and his wealth, and let's see if the system holds up. Let's see if he curses you.
Exactly. It is a literal stress test of human integrity.
Yeah.
He is absolutely on the divine payroll. He serves a necessary function in a strictly monotheistic universe. He separates, genuine faith from convenient faith.
Okay, but I'm struggling with a massive jump here, though.
Yeah.
If Ha-Satan was basically God's QA tester, how on earth did he become the guy ruling a lake of fire with a pitchfork? Like, did he get fired? Or are we looking at a completely different character in later traditions?
It's a really valid question. To understand that leap, we have to look at the concept of a rebellion within the throne room itself. The Bible Project source provides an incredible analysis of the Genesis story that honestly reframes this entirely for modern readers.
Okay, lay it on.
So we usually picture the Garden of Eden as this lush botanical park with a talking snake, right? But ancient readers understood Eden as a high place, a cosmic mountain, or a temple-like space where heaven and earth and their respective creatures overlap.
Wait, so the snake isn't just a garden variety reptile?
Far from it. When the prophet Isaiah has a vision of God's heavenly throne room, he sees these majestic, fiery, spiritual beings praising God. They're called the seraphim.
Okay, I've heard of seraphim.
Right, but in Hebrew, seraphim literally translates to fiery snake. Yeah. So the implication drawn by many scholars is that the creature in Eden was actually a spiritual being, a high-ranking member of God's divine council. According to interpretations of the prophets Ezekiel and Isaiah, this was a spiritual being who didn't want to live under God's wisdom and authority anymore. His pride convinced him he could run the cosmos better.
He wanted the top job.
Exactly.
So he goes to the newly created humans and says, hey, you can rule the world by your own wisdom. You don't need the boss. Eat this fruit and you will be like God. That means the original sin in this narrative wasn't just, eating a piece of fruit. It was humanity falling for a cosmic corporate coup.
A corporate coup is the perfect way to phrase it. And Christianity solidifies this narrative over centuries. Early thinkers, like St. Augustine, they really cemented the idea of the devil as a fallen angel.
Right.
The personification of evil, who rebelled out of a pure desire for equality with the Creator. In the New Testament, he's the ultimate tempter, disguising himself as an angel of light.
And then the book of Revelation portrays him as a great dragon waging war against the archangel Michael, which deliberately echoes those ancient Old Testament chaos monsters we talked about earlier.
Yes, it ties it all together beautifully.
Let's shift over to the Islamic tradition for a second, because the sources show they handle this exact same narrative beat, the rebellion in the throne room, but with a totally different mechanism for how evil operates in the world.
Yeah, the Islamic perspective is incredibly nuanced here.
In Islam, the devil is known as Iblis, or Shaitan. But he isn't a fallen angel. He's a jinn, which is a being made of smokeless fire.
And the psychology of his rebellion is highly specific and fascinating. So when God created Adam out of clay, God commanded all the heavenly beings to bow before this new human creation. But Iblis, out of sheer pride and envy, refused.
You wouldn't bow.
No, he looked at Adam and essentially argued supremacy. He said, I am made of fire, he is made of mud, I am superior.
It's just pure, unchecked ego. But here is the crucial distinction that really stood out to me. In the Christian narrative, the devil is waging a cosmic war to usurp God's throne. But in classical Islamic thought, Iblis isn't trying to overthrow God. He knows he can't.
Right, God is supreme.
So instead, he asks God for permission to prove the humans are unworthy.
Yes. In Islam, evil does not have independent power. God remains supremely sovereign. So when Iblis is condemned for his pride, he asks for and is granted a deferment until the day of judgment.
He asks for time.
Exactly. He is given permission to tempt humanity. He isn't rebelling against God's ultimate power directly. He is rebelling against humans. His weapon isn't a cosmic army. It's whispering, stirring anger, impure thoughts, inciting vanity, and creating distractions from prayer.
It's a complete shift from cosmic horror to psychological warfare. When we go back to our tech analogies, he's not a warlord trying to blow up the server room. He's a hacker running a massive phishing scam.
A phishing scam. That's perfect.
Right. He's whispering in your ear, sending you fake alerts, hoping you will willingly hand over your password and compromise your own soul. He knows he can't break the system, so he just tries to corrupt the users.
The phishing analogy maps perfectly onto the theology. Evil becomes an internal test rather than an external conquering force. But this theological progression leaves a massive unresolved question for ancient philosophers.
Oh.
Yeah, because if evil is just a psychological test, or if the devil is just a fallen employee, how do we explain the inherent physical cruelty of the world? Things like bone cancer or tsunamis that wipe out entire cities. A phishing scam doesn't cause a famine.
That is the exact problem that caused certain ancient thinkers to take a radical, controversial leap. They looked at the brutality of the physical world and concluded, a perfectly good God couldn't have made this meat grinder. The Creator himself must be broken.
And this brings us to Gnosticism, which serves as a massive bridge between traditional monotheism and modern atheistic rebellion.
Tell me more about the Gnostics.
Well, Gnostic traditions flourished in the early centuries of the Common Era, kind of blending Greek philosophy, Iranian dualism, and Jewish mysticism. And they introduced the concept of the demiurge.
The flawed creator.
Exactly the concept. In the Gnostic framework, the physical, material world we live in isn't a good creation that accidentally fell into chaos. The material world is a prison matrix.
A literal prison.
Yes, it was built by an inferior, tyrannical, and ignorant deity, the demiurge. But beyond this flawed creator, far outside the physical universe, there is a higher, true, unknowable God of pure spirit and light.
Okay, here's where the sources completely blew my mind. Because in this Gnostic view, they take the Genesis story and they flip the script entirely.
They turn it upside down.
Yeah. If the creator of the physical world is an oppressive tyrant trying to keep human souls trapped in ignorance, then the serpent in the Garden of Eden, who offers the fruit of the tree of knowledge, isn't Satan. The serpent is a hero.
It is a staggering theological inversion. Some Gnostic sects viewed the serpent as a liberator. The serpent is delivering forbidden divine knowledge gnosis against the will of this oppressive demiurge.
So the rebel isn't bringing chaos. He's bringing enlightenment.
Exactly. He's waking humanity up to the fact that they are spiritual prisoners in a flawed physical system.
The serpent is basically Morpheus in the Matrix, offering humanity the red pill.
Yeah.
You read that, and you immediately realize this ancient theological concept sounds exactly like modern anti-authoritarianism.
Right.
The rebel isn't evil. The rebel is the only one telling you the truth about the corrupt authority in charge.
And that right there is the direct philosophical ancestor to modern secular thought. Building directly on that Gnostic idea of rebellion as liberation, atheism and secularism adopted this exact framework, but they removed the supernatural element entirely.
They stripped it down.
Right. Evil is no longer a cosmic force or a spiritual being. It's a construct born from human actions and choices. The devil becomes a literary device.
Let's talk about atheistic Satanism here, like LaVeyan Satanism or the Satanic Temple.
Yeah.
Because this trips people up all the time.
Oh, constantly.
People assume they are sacrificing goats to a literal red monster in a basement somewhere.
That is a fundamental misunderstanding of their philosophy. To atheistic Satanists, Satan is not a literal being at all. He is purely a symbol. Anton LaVey used Satan to represent human nature, pride, indulgence, and personal power.
He's the ultimate adversary to religions that they view as restrictive hypocritical, or oppressive.
Exactly. And then the Satanic Temple takes a more activist approach, using the imagery of Satan strictly as a symbol of justice, free thought, and defiance against authoritarianism in the public square.
It's the ultimate literary repurposing. And you see the seeds of this in classical literature centuries earlier, too.
Oh, definitely.
Like in Dante's Inferno in the 14th century. Satan is this pathetic, three-faced beast trapped in ice, just mechanically chewing on traitors. He has no voice. But by the time you get to John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost in the 17th century, Satan is reimagined as this tragic, charismatic rebel who defies God out of principle.
He becomes compelling.
He's one of the most complex literary anti-heroes ever written. Milton's Satan famously says, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." That single line rewrote how Western culture views defiance. It made rebellion look noble.
And that nobility of defiance becomes the cornerstone of modern secular philosophy. Look at Friedrich Nietzsche. When Nietzsche famously declared God is dead, he wasn't talking about a literal assassination in heaven.
Right.
He meant that traditional religious morals and dogmas had lost their authority to dictate truth in the modern scientific world. In that moral vacuum, Satan becomes less of an entity to fear and more of a symbol of radical rebellion and self-determination.
And Camus played with this too.
Yeah, the philosopher Albert Camus. He viewed life as inherently absurd and meaningless. For Camus, Satan is a metaphor for the chaos we struggle against and the defiant resilience we must embody when trying to find our own purpose in a godless universe.
Let me stop you there, because this is where the secular shift gets incredibly heavy.
How so?
Well, if we remove the supernatural devil entirely, like if there's no cosmic rival, no divine QA tester, no whispering jinn, we shift all the blame from the cosmos directly onto ourselves.
We do.
Is it actually more terrifying to believe that evil isn't a red monster with a pitchfork, but just our own unchecked ego and human will? Because if there is no demon making me do it, I am the only one responsible for the darkness I create.
That is the terrifying burden of human will. Without a cosmic scapegoat, humanity has to look in the mirror. And what's remarkable is how closely this modern secular view aligns with ancient Eastern and non-theistic frameworks that have been saying this for millennia.
Right, they never had the red monster to begin with.
Exactly. In Sikhism, for instance, there is no direct concept of a supernatural devil. Instead, evil is represented through Maya, which is illusion, and the five thieves: pride, lust, greed, attachment, and anger.
The five thieves. So these aren't external demons possessing you. They're internal glitches in your own hardware.
They are internal forces that steer humans away from spiritual growth. Look at Buddhism, too. They don't have a Satan ruling hell, but they have Mara.
Who is Mara?
Mara is a celestial being who embodies desire, death, and illusion. When the Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree trying to achieve enlightenment, Mara tried to stop him. Not with hellfire or armies, but by tempting him with visions, stoking his lust, his hesitation, his vanity, and his fear. Mara is the psychological barrier to enlightenment.
He weaponizes Siddhartha's own internal desires against him.
Exactly, the mechanism. Or consider the Baha'i faith and Sufi philosophy. In those traditions, the devil isn't a fallen angel who rebelled in heaven. It is simply the human ego.
Just the ego.
Yeah. In Sufism, the devil is what happens when you say the word I too much. It's the arrogance of placing your own self-centered desires, your own I, above the divine reality or the greater good of humanity.
The ego saying, I too much. That is such a piercing way to describe the root of human conflict. A dictator invading a country isn't possessed by a dragon. He's just saying, I want more too much. It all comes back to the man in the mirror.
It always does.
We started this deep dive looking for a clean definition of ultimate evil, and instead we traced an incredible mirror of human evolution. We watched the adversary morph from an Egyptian cosmic chaos serpent named Apep into God's literal prosecuting attorney stress-testing humanity.
Quite the resume.
Right. And then we saw him mutate into the charismatic, tragic rebel of Milton's literature, and finally settle into a purely secular metaphor for our own psychology, our defiance, and our ego.
It truly is a mirror reflecting our own development as a species. How we define the adversary fundamentally defines how we see ourselves, our morality, and the universe we inhabit. But exploring all these sources leaves us with a fascinating and somewhat unsettling new frontier to consider. If the modern secular and philosophical view is correct, that the devil is just a metaphor for our own ego, defiance, and individuality, it raises an important question. Does overcoming evil mean we have to suppress our individuality? Or does it mean we finally have to take absolute terrifying responsibility for it?
Man, now there's a thought to keep you up at night. When the diagnostic X-ray finally clears up, it's not pointing at a monster under the bed. It's pointing right back at our own programming. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Remember to keep questioning the narratives around you, keep examining your own internal hardware, and we'll catch you next time.